Welcome to the Iron Brew Podcast. Brad Mel, Matt Blanchard, Matt Ellis, and we're joined live tonight once again by Iron Chairman Peter Swann. Then, Peter, thank you for coming back on. How are you doing?
Yeah, good evening. Happy New Year to everybody.
Yes, Happy New Year. So, as you can imagine, we've had a lot of questions sent in from fans, and we've tried to group them into topics like we normally do. So we'll go through a few throughout the interview. Let's start off though. It's obviously it's quite a concerning time for the club at the minute, and I think the two immediate threats are probably COVID, and obviously the prospect of relegation. Given that we are quite close to the bottom now. Is there a plan in place to sort of, I guess, get the season back on track, be that off the pitch or on the pitch, and effectively save the season?
I think the most important thing is we've got to win games. I've been looking at some of the figures from last year, and it is quite interesting to see at this point. Last year we were only 6 points better off, and that was down to actually drawing 6 games rather than actually winning any more. We actually won the same amount of games, so. It is difficult at 23 games. Yes, you'd love to be in a bit better position, but we're not. We've lost, I think, 8 games 1-0, and it would have been a lot better if we could have turned some of them into draws and maybe those into wins. But that's where we are. The managers are learning on the job. We're learning on the job, and we're having to go through some pretty dramatic times with COVID. So. Since we've gone down to League Two, we haven't finished the season yet, have we? So we're hoping that we finish this season. And if you look at last season as well, our last 13 games last season, we only won 3 games and drew 3. We actually only got 12 points out of a possible 39. And that was under, what supposedly was a more experienced manager. So I think some of the stuff angled at Neil is a little bit harsh. I think he's doing the best job he can. This is his first job. He's 23 games in, and we're just trying to work together to make sure that we get as many wins as we can in the next 23 games. I don't think we can. I mean, if you look at how we've played, I don't think we've played very well in a lot of those games, and we've come away with 23 points. I think we can improve that, and I suppose our target is to make sure we get to 50 points. So can we get 27 points out of 23? Well, if we don't, we probably deserve to go down anyway.
In a recent interview with Radio Humberside, Peter, it struck me and quite a few fans, I think, you were relatively downbeat, which is obviously a little bit of a contrast to your normal upbeat self. And I think it's one of the first times I've been genuinely worried about the future of the club. Has anything happened since that interview to change or improve your outlook?
Yeah, I must admit that outlook was, that probably wasn't down just to the football. In fact, it wasn't down to the football. We've lost people we know during COVID, and I was quite close to Ray Clements and B, and we'd spent time together. So I suppose that hit me pretty hard. I tell you what, it's been difficult. The majority of the time I've been reasonably buzzy, like I normally am. I'm very upbeat, but I went through a bit of a tough stage there, and that's going to happen to me now and again. But fortunately, the group of people I've got at the club, including the manager and everybody else, they kept me going through that little bit of a time when, normally I'm the first one bouncing in and supporting everybody. So, this is a massive team effort from us. We were going through some very, very difficult times, and that wasn't down to that wasn't down to the football club. Yes, it doesn't help when you lose week in, week out, but that were many other things associated with losing friends. So. Pick that one into touch. I've got to shoulder that and move on now and try and get the best out of Neil and the team.
Yeah, just on that team then, obviously Neil's made it quite clear he's looking for a striker in January. Do you think that any other arrivals are going to be likely before the end of the month, or we're going to have to get through to the end of the season with kind of the players we've got and the players that are coming back from injury?
Well, we've got a striker coming in. I can tell you that. His name's KVV, and he should be back in the next 2 weeks. He'll be a new striker for us. He's been out a long time this season. He's raring to go. There isn't a better player in League Two than him in that position, I believe. And yes, it's not easy to put a lot of pressure on the young man's shoulders, but whoever you bring in, if you're saying I need a striker, I'll go and get one. It's going to be the same pressure on them as it would be on Kev. So, it would be good to have him back. Fella probably back 2 or 3 weeks later than Kev. Might just give us a little bit more ammunition. But yeah, we've certainly lacked up top. That's no different actually from last year. I think we scored 44 goals last year and only conceded 56. So we scored 44 goals in 37 games again under a more experienced manager with a better team. With all due respect, I thought we had a better squad last season. So I think you have to take it into context. It's not easy. I think we have to hold our nerve. We have to be strong, and we have to support as much as we can. And that's all I'll do. And hopefully Neil can get down to the bottom of this. We're not far away. It looks like Neil's seems to have got us at the back now. Strong as best we can. We've had a lot of injuries. We miss Harrison when he's out, and then when Manny was out, and we had the 2 young lads in, it was difficult. You have a 19-year-old and a 20-year-old in there at centre back. It's very difficult. But we're now coming to the other end of that, and hopefully with Harrison back and Manny back at the weekend as well, we can kick on with a more stable back 4, back 3, back 5, whatever he wants to do, and with the addition of Tafton, who looks a really good player, we can now kick on and focus on the other end of the pitch and try and score some goals.
In terms of Kev, obviously he's been out for a little while now, and I think originally it was suggested it could be maybe 12 weeks before he was back. Again, he seems to be returning ahead of schedule. Not saying he's not fit and not ready to return, but is there a risk there that he could break down again, and we're in the same place we were a couple of months ago? And obviously you mentioned Kev coming back in. Does that mean there's going to be no striker, from outside the club coming in this January?
No, there may well be if we find the right one. It's difficult. There are a lot of players out there, but still a lot of those players don't understand the difficulties of the salary cap and how much we're limited to spend. So we're on that. We are now looking at a couple of extra players to come in. A couple need to go out, and we're working on that as well. That's not too easy to do. Again, there's certainly a surplus of players around the league at the minute. There's not too much business going on, well, not as much as you'd expect. So yes, there will be hopefully players coming in and players going out, but with Kev, he will only play when we're absolutely 100%. I can tell you he has probably targeted the Grimsby game, don't know why, and really focused on that. And I'm watching him today in training, and he's not fit. He's not fit, but the guy gives us so much mentally now. He's certainly this stint now, certainly in the last sort of year. He's really grown up, and even when he's not on the pitch, he has a real impact on the club with the other lads. So he's a new Kev, and if we can get him back for the last 20 games, I'm almost certain that we'll get enough points. And because that if he'd have played in any of those 1-0ers, we'd have turned those around, some of those around. Just his set pieces, we've struggled having a set piece taker as such. Some of our delivery's been quite poor, and we just haven't taken any chances. We're not being very clinical. So that's what strikers there for: come in under pressure, score goals. So we'll make sure that Kev is 100%. He's certainly well ahead of where he was before his last injury when he came back. He's ahead of that now, so he's stronger than he was when he came back the last time, and he will be stronger when he's there. So he's our biggest asset, and we've got to look after him.
You mentioned there about the players going out, and obviously with the salary cap and things like that, that's what's going to have to happen to allow people to come in, basically. Obviously, we know that the 3 players we had on loan have gone back to their respective clubs. Has there been interest in some of our players? Is it likely that we are going to be able to move a few out, before this window shuts? Yeah,
we've had interest in several of our players. So obviously, the majority of that's been from the conference. They seem to have more money than us at the minute, so that seems to be the ideal way to get some of them games. But we'll take it as it comes over the next couple of weeks. But we'll definitely do our best to improve the squad. Neil says we've got a big squad. Yes, we have got a big squad. We've got 2 teams. We've got under 23s and a first team, and we've also got 5 youth in that squad that came up last year and played yet, who were there long term. And then when you add our injuries in that, you know, we're okay. It's not easy to coach them on one pitch. I think that's really where he struggles. Difficult to use the school in these COVID conditions. We are limited to the one training pitch, so trying to get 30 players on there when they're all fit, it's not easy.
Is the interest in players that are kind of fringe players and under 23 players, or has there been any interest in, you know, some of the players that have been kind of linked with moves away? I'm kind of thinking Issa and McAtee, the two. No one's phoned me up about McAtee or Issa. No one's phoned me about any other player. In such, these are fringe players who need games of football, need to get out and play because they haven't quite broken through into the first team as yet. You know, there's a couple of those, certainly Kelsey, Mooney and Keenan, although Keenan's been on the fringe. Difficult as well. European background, came into the club, probably hasn't fitted in and got into any rhythm yet because he hasn't been able to start games and maybe play 2 or 3 games. But, you know, there's something there with Keenan. You can see that. Kelsey just hasn't broken into the team and he was out at Hereford. So I'm sure we'll try and get him out some more experience. Again, there's a player there. It's just, you know, sometimes they click and they work straight away and sometimes they don't. You can't get it always right every time. It's not going to work. You're not going to get every player right, whether that be physical, mentally, technical ability, but you try your best.
Obviously, an ex-Iron favourite, Dwayne Holmes, is looks set to move in the next few days. Do we have a sell-on for Dwayne? And if so, would that allow us to get another player into the club this window?
Oh, if we can get rid of him for about 5 million, yeah, I think so. Something like that would help. But no, you know, we got a good deal on Dwayne. You know, I had to, I had to move 4 players on because of their contract situation. And Dwayne was one of those, and we got a very good deal for him. We've got to sell on and hopefully we'd get a little bit in, but most of that would go to cover the losses we have at the minute, because that's what we'd have to do. That's what the EFL would demand we do.
You mentioned earlier on about last season and how, you know, it didn't conclude properly. Obviously, as we know, it went to points per game. So was there any indication when that happened from the EFL or whoever decided that was going to happen, that should it be required, it would go to points per game again this season? And obviously, given that we're dropping points to teams in and around the relegation area, that's quite a worrying thing if it does go to that.
Yeah, it is, but there's a lot of other things to take into consideration. I don't think it's just as straightforward as the points. I think we can finish football. I think if you look at the way that football has operated in some of the most difficult circumstances, hopefully we can come out of this in a few weeks' time. If we can play now, we can play at any time. This is a peak in the pandemic again, and we're still playing. So I think we'll finish the season. But yes, the EFL has, and most of the teams agreed that it would be a point per game system if we didn't finish the season. But I think we'll finish the season.
Given that, you know, we've been struggling for a little while now, I think a lot of fans have kind of sent in messages about, you know, if the worst is to happen and we do get relegated, is there a kind of contingency in place, and would you see to kind of develop a roadmap for an immediate return?
No, not thinking about it. Absolutely not. My focus is on survival in League 2, and I think we'll do that. I don't think you can plan for that sort of relegation. It's impossible. And we're not. That's not even in our minds. I think our squad is good enough to gain enough points to stay up. All we've got to do is try and win more games than 2 teams. That's what we've got to do. You know, that's the most important thing to do. Go out there and get 27 points. I think that'll be enough. That's what we've got to focus on. 9 wins out of 23. And like I said, if we're not good enough to do that, you know, that'll be down to the players on the pitch. And that's it, really. I mean, if they don't perform, I don't know what you can do. It's very difficult. But we've got enough. I think we've got a nice balance of experience now. And with the players who might come back, including Kev, that just enhances that.
And just before we go on to sort of staying up and survival, I know obviously you don't particularly want to talk about the prospect of us going into non-league, but obviously it is a possibility. And just in terms of where we are now behind the scenes, should that happen, obviously we all hope it doesn't happen. is there sort of contingency plans in place, i.e. in terms of like relegation release clauses or wage drop clauses, things like that in the current contracts for players?
No, not going to happen anyway. Honestly, I wouldn't even go down that. I'm not even contemplating it's going down. So we're going to stay up, and we're going to be a league club next season.
Assuming we stay up this season, Peter, which I'm inclined to agree. We have the quality of the club. Hopefully, it will come to the fore in the next few weeks. But what's the plan for the next few years? As I said, assume we do stay in the league this year.
Continue what we're doing. Probably had too many young people in. It may have worked without all the COVID issues. I don't know, but we had a lot of young players come in without the experienced players. We probably needed 2 or 3 more experienced players, but they just weren't around. Unless you play your young players and understand you might have said, well, we need we've got young Mason O'Malley coming into the side. We need a left back, experienced left back. Well, to be honest, Mason's done really well. And if we hadn't played him and looked at him, maybe we would have brought another left back in, but we haven't. Junior's come in to help back end of the season to support, give us a bit of experience. And Mason has proved he's a first team player. I think it's the same with others. We're all talking about having 2 or 3 quality midfielders who are years of experience. Well, I like to think Spence and Alfie Beeston have proved and that they're getting better and better every game. I still think that they've got such a great future ahead of them, and we've got them. They're on contract, and we've got them. Signing Jem, obviously, been with us a couple of months and was training. The worry was that he'd not played for nearly 18 months, and even then not played a lot of games. So we had a look at him for an extra few weeks, and when we knew that Port Vale would, when we knew that parent of Jake, I'm going mad now, was going back to his club, we knew that we had to bring somebody in. So it was an ideal opportunity for him to come in, and I think in 2 or 3 games he'll be up to speed, and he'll give us a lot. So we've learnt a lot, probably at the wrong time, but I think these guys can improve. I definitely think they can improve. I definitely think we get the point. So we continue to develop young players, bring players through. Like I say, we're probably going to take 4 or 5 of the youngsters a game this season and put them in the 23s and develop them. Maybe bring a couple of the others through into the first team squad. Squads go down to 20 next year, so 20 of your squad can be over 23. That's it. The rest have to be under 21s or under 23s. So there's a little bit of work in there to be done, and we're on a 1.5 million pound salary cap. So again, and that includes everybody. That includes all your appearance money. That includes your agents' fees. That includes your travel, your relocate. That's everything. NI, all in there. So you can imagine it's a hell of a drop from the 3.5 million that we had maybe a couple of years ago. So we're having to adjust ourselves and work forward. And it's not an easy time to do it, but that's the way we must go anyway.
You mentioned Mason O'Malley there, Peter, and obviously quite a lot of Iron fans have been impressed with him. I think the podcast included, and he recently signed a new contract, which was obviously great news. Was that down to his performances, or was that because there was outside interest into him?
No, I think it was down. I think he earned it. I think he earned his contract. It's one that works for the club and works for him. This is not the big deal for him. I think the big deal for him will come in a couple of years' time. But we've been impressed with his attitude. He's very mature. He's probably not playing the last couple of games because he got himself burnt out a little bit, a bit tired. Even though he hadn't had COVID or anything like that. I think it's like everybody. This mentally drains you, and I think mentally he was very tired as well. So giving him a couple of weeks off is not the worst thing in the world for his development, and that we will look after him as we will everyone who's in that sort of frame of mind. So there's nothing sinister about it. No one's in for him. He's not being sold anywhere. We will be selling players in the future, but we need to develop them first.
Obviously, as Matt say there, echoing the idea of getting that deal in for O'Malley. Beeston is another one. It's probably worth mentioning him because he's one that's really stepped up this season. I think another one that certainly from a fan's perspective has deserved that contract.
Yeah. Took it when he came back. I mean, obviously it's difficult, and I know you're going to say these are club player signings, etc. I know we'll probably talk about, but yeah, listen, he came back in. He's fitter, stronger. He looked a completely different guy, mentally changed. So we had an option on him, so we made sure we took the option. He's come in, and again he's earned his stripes. He deserves his contract, and he will only get better. I don't know whether he is a midfielder or a 10. I mean, he's doing a great job there. I think there's a lot more to him. I think going forward, I think we'll get a lot more out of him. It's just the way we've been playing at the minute, we're probably not been releasing the player's ability as much because we've been trying to get results. And I can understand why Neil wanted to try and be as hard to beat as possible. But there's a lot of talent in this side, and we have seen it at moments. And Alfie is certainly a big part of our future plans.
I think obviously great. The fans kind of were really happy that those two have been tied to longer deals. Obviously, in the past, you've not been kind of forthcoming with those deals in the middle of the season. Why has there been that kind of change in approach this year? And I suppose you've answered why it was important to tie those two down. But yeah, why the change in approach?
I think the change in approach has come from the fact that when we came down, we had a lot of players. I think there were 13 players who left us last year who were on League One wages. We had to really tie ourselves down to a more sustainable model and get rid of those players. So you end up looking at different ways of approaching it. And to be honest, we've been looking at these new deals right at the beginning of the year for these guys, just trying to find the right moment to do it. And I think before Christmas they knew their deals, which was quite nice. It's just I wouldn't say it's a complete change because we have offered contracts to other players who just turned us down. I mean, we go back to the old scenario of the hassle we had with Bish and Dorse in the January that time. They've both been offered contracts. The only problem is they both wanted 3-year contracts, and we're already had contracts. So we're not against giving people contracts. It's just the timing of it. We felt we'd done half a job that year, and that's why a lot of contracts weren't signed in the January. We wanted people to prove their worth. They all had massive bonuses if they went up, so I don't think there was any doubt that if they played well, that would have been the case. And I suppose after you go through that, and you then come down to looking at youngsters, you have to probably prepare a little bit earlier. You have to look at their ability when they're 16, 17, not when they're 30. So you're more looking to the future, and you're taking a little bit more of a risk. But those costs are a little bit less than trying to pay £3,000 a week for a player who's in their 30s, to maybe 500 or 600 quid for a young lad who's coming through. So it's all part of the change, I think. And we will not know if that works until we sell somebody or we've got the whole team under contract for a season or more.
We've had quite a lot of messages in, and obviously after games on social media, you only have to spend a few minutes. And I think it's fair to say sort of dissenting voices towards you and as chairman are kind of growing in recent months. I've seen people kind of calling for your head and calling for you to leave the club. How would you kind of respond to those fans that are calling for you to leave?
That's not really changed, has it, Matt, to be honest? I mean, when you think about it, the first day I walked through, they were giving me 6 weeks or 8 weeks before I would leave the club. I'm here, what am I, in my 8th year? I've put a lot of money where my mouth is. I've invested in the team. I gave this club 5 years in League One, which is one of the most stable, times in the club's history for that period. We broke records, won, great home record that was unbeaten for a year. I mean, we've done loads of stuff in those 5 years. It's just the last 2 have been, mistakes. So, you know what? It's so difficult when you remove a manager to put another manager in, because you've got to have some sort of idea who you need for the circumstances you're in. But you've also got to look at how the fans have approached it. And I think when I put Nick in charge, he'd only lost 2 games out of about 18 games. The lad had he knocking on my door going, I want to take the job. There isn't, I'm in here. I've only lost 2 games. I think I can get it done. I think I can do it. And, I think at the time all the fans were going, it's very hard not to give the guy the job, and then when it doesn't go quite right because it's his first job and it doesn't work, you have to change it, and you bring some experience in. That doesn't work. One of the most experienced managers in Stuart McCall, but again we've gone a horrendous run where we lose, I think, 8 or 9 on the trot. Seem to think we're getting out of it in Christmas, and then we go back to the same old routine again. And I'm not sure whether he'd have kept us up or not, but in the end it doesn't matter, because you make that decision and try and keep yourself up. I think we needed 7 points from 7 games, and we just weren't good enough. And we tried to play most of the experienced players under Andy, and you give Andy the chance to do that, and it didn't quite work. And then you bring another guy in who just doesn't do the job that said he would do. So, it happens. I mean, we could sit here and moan about the past or be great about the past. I mean, most Scottish fans just think about the time they're in the Championship anyway. So, I can't compete with that. I can't compete with those players. I picked this club in League Two. We had, even some of the players that the manager had signed that season. Chris Alumu, Speedy Alumu. I mean, with all due respect to Chris, and he's a lovely guy, he couldn't move. And we were paying these thousands of pounds, and I had to clear up all that and get us promoted. I got us promoted, and I got us competing at the top of League One in a very competitive marketplace. Those teams we were competing against were some of the best, and they have proved it. Sheffield United are in the Prem, and most of the teams that we're up against had 10 and 12 million pound budgets, and there we were with a 3 million pound budget. So it wasn't splashing the cash; it was doing it actually quite well. But things come to an end, and you make mistakes. And like I said, I put my hand up. I didn't put the right manager in at the right time, and we are where we are. But I'm still here. I'm still working. They're calling for my head, which is great. Listen, there's another multi-billionaire waiting to take over Scunthorpe United. Then they know where I am, and they aren't there. I can tell you, they are not there. It's not easy. It's not easy to sell a club in these conditions. It's not easy to get investors in these conditions, and we're moving to a sustainable model, so the club can be run in a different way, and that actually works with the current salary cap. We can't put 3.5. You're not allowed to put 3.5 million. So we have to work to the 1.5 million, which is not far off what Scunthorpe can afford. With its own incomes. So it's, do I look at media as much as I used to? No, not if I'm honest. I don't. I know what I'm going to get. It's the same old odds as well. Are going to just batter me anyway, whether we win or not. If we win a game 1-0, it should have been 4-0, and it's my fault. It's exactly the same. So you have to take it. It gets a bit harsh when you're threatened, and you hear the insults and what's being thrown at you, because I don't think this is the time where you should have big shoulders and you should take it on the chin. I don't think those attitudes are right, because if you abuse anybody else now, it's a mental attack on them. A chairman seems to be like this stone figure that you can bounce everything off, and that doesn't happen. We're here. We love the game. I love the game. I love working at Scunthorpe. I enjoy the people at Scunthorpe, and it's tough times, but we'll come out the other end, and we might not have a laugh, but we'll do our best to try and make the club successful again.
It seems to me, like, from the response to that, essentially you're talking about resolve there. And as you mentioned, you've been here, 8 years or so. Obviously, with the different leagues and things, the goals and the aims change as we go along. But, in terms of yourself, do you still have the same interest and drive and ambition, that you did when you first came here? Obviously, given that we've gone through a few managers, and likelihood is you're having, pretty close personal relationships with some of them. You'll like them, and obviously have to see them move on and things like that.
Yeah, that's a horrendous part of it. That you make them friends, and I probably didn't get close to the last two because I didn't really get time to. But that's my own fault, isn't it? Shooting from the hip sometimes. But listen, those decisions have to be made, and in the long term, we'll see whether I'm right or wrong. And it's not easy. Listen. Everybody thought I signed everybody in the summer, so I must be enjoying myself. The the summer window. Now your guys are as bad as that as everybody else. The summer recruitment wasn't brilliant. I don't know. I don't think it was too bad. Not for a 57-year-old bloke who doesn't know nothing about football. I thought it was reasonable, actually. It could have been a lot worse. But we couldn't let it lie. We couldn't. There were players that needed contracts, new contracts. There were players that needed bringing in. There were positions that we need to bring in, and we maybe brought in 3 or 4 more. I'd rather have 3 or 4 more than 3 or 4 less, and not be able to put out first team. So a lot of those lads are in the under 23s and under 21. We had about 22, 23 players over 23. So we did what we had to do. A couple of them haven't worked, but a few of them have worked. So, you know, I like to think that it's a shame Jarvis got injured. I just thought we saw Jarvis starting to really work the channels and get up to speed. Really disappointed because I thought he would turn the corner there. You know, I think Manny's proved what he can do in defence. He is one of the best non-league, and I think he's one of the better ones in League Two now. So I think Manny's a good choice. And Spence, you know, you call him the new Dawson if you want. I think he's the new Spence. I think he's just Spence, isn't he? It's, you know, he's an engine, and he goes out there and wins everything as much as he can, works hard. And let's hope that some of these players go on and prove it, you know, for the club. It's not just about proving it for me or the manager, it's about proving it to themselves. You know, it's do they want to be part of a team that survived and battle hardened for the last 23 games, or do they want to be part of a team that's failed? So I know what they want. I know that the experienced players will carry them along, and we've got a long way to go. I mean, it does feel a long time. I mean, I must admit, this is a long time. It feels a lot longer than 10 months since March. It really does. So, but we continue on it, and we're working hard to try and get the best team together.
I'm sure we'll move on and talk about the signings in a little bit more detail later. But in a statement, you suggested you're exploring the idea of writing off your loans to the club. Have there been any developments regarding this? And if so, would writing off the loans affect the club's assets?
No. The very difficult thing is we've got a club that and we've got planning permission to do various things to improve the position of the club, to get some money back into the club, get some money back into the coffers, to get a little bit back. You know, I spent and I've invested more than any other chairman in the whole of Scunthorpe's history in this team. You know, a huge amount of money, and that's been on wages. And what we want to do now is we want to build the club up. So we've got plans to do that around us. We still want to do that, but obviously COVID's put a big dent in that. You know, you're not going to spend millions and millions of pounds on a football club, and no one's going to. And you need investment. You need to borrow money, and you need investment to do that. So, no one's going to invest in a football club. So you need to separate it off. So the football club has to be separate from the asset, so that you can trade the football club as per normal. You protect its interest, you protect the history of the club, and what you do then is, you find those other assets into the company where you can actually go and get some investors and loans because you're working through the company rather than a football. No one's going to give. Well, they won't even give you loans. So you've got to do it that way. So it's a practical thing to do. And at the same time, we thought, well, wouldn't this be a good opportunity to write the loans off, just to show, what I've said all along is that, we put our money where our mouth is, and that's it. So, we've still got a lot of investment. We paid a lot of money when we first came into the club, and we're going to still put a lot more money into the surrounding area of the club so that we can be here for a long time.
Despite COVID, I think it's fair to say there is some building work going on around Scunthorpe. You know, still some housing developments going on. In terms of the flats, is that not something that you could press ahead with now, or because you've got the outline planning permission, or are you holding back because of COVID?
Yeah, I think it's the investment. I mean, if you're going to build 160 apartments, you're probably going to spend somewhere in the region of 10 million. Where are you going to get 10 million in a minute? Where are you going to get half of that? If you're to go in with an investor. So this is what we're working on. This is what we do outside of football, and that's what I plan to do. I think anything needs cash, and cash flow at the minute is down to virtually zero. Well, it's been zero for nearly 10 months, which as a hospitality business is very difficult. And we have other projects. The hotel in Blackpool is still going along because money has been set aside for that, but we've still got financing on it. So as a businessman, it's not easy. It's not easy, unless I'm selling PPE, or I'm doing something with the jabs, the 200 million jabs. I'm not going to make any money. It's if you're into chemicals, you're having a great time, aren't you, at the minute? But I'm not. I mean, hospitality, we've been battered, absolutely battered, and I think I'd like to say that the football gives me an out from that, but when you're not winning, as you know, it's not as easy. So no, we keep on working. We're finding ways to make sure that the club survives, and that's what we continue to do.
You mentioned earlier on that there's no one lining up to take the club off your hands if you did decide that it was time to go. We've had an interesting comment sent in, and it was just basically regarding that, and regarding that some supporters are perhaps frightened for the future of the club without your financial support, because obviously we all know you've put a lot of money into the club over the last 5 or 6 years. But on the other hand, there's many others as well that are maybe looking at how we've kind of fallen from the top of League One to the bottom of League Two in such a short space of time. And, we're thinking this is only going to end one way. What would you kind of say to those who are kind of worried that, the direction that you take in the club?
Yeah, I don't think we've fallen. I think there was more worry before I came in. League One, League Two. I think there you're more likely to go out the league. I came in, invested, and got the club up. I did that. I promised I'd do that. We did it in that first year, and we worked very hard to do that. So, and then to stay 5 years in League One. So, yes, it wasn't easy. Because if you remember, we were bottom when we brought Mark Robbins in. I think at the time, we weren't in great form there, and we managed to clear ourselves off the bottom. So we've been there before. After that, we worked very hard keeping ourselves in the division. And yeah, the last 2 years, which have been affected by probably a couple of bad decisions by myself and this COVID. We're supposed to be turning over 290 to 300k a month. We're turning over next to nothing. The only money we've got coming in is our solidarity payments from the Football League. We've had a little bit in from the season tickets and people buying through the shop, which is really helping us. And we still, want to thank everybody for doing that. That still is important. And we're going to go a whole season without fans in the stadiums. I mean, this is the lifeblood of League Two clubs and a lot of League One clubs are the fans. Only small, 3,500 fans coming in and spending money, and whether they enjoy it or not is dependent. But they come here every Saturday and they watch what we put out, and we've had no one in. So you can't lose that and it not affect you. And we're not the only club. We've not borrowed any money from the league as yet. We've worked very hard to mitigate everything and cut our costs down, and we've done so well on that. But we had £40,000 worth of testing that we had to pay for because it wasn't paid for by the league. We've had no money from the government. We've had a 1% of the 30 million that has given to all the clubs. We've had 1% of it, 300 grand. That's all we've had, and we're losing 1.5 to 1.9 million. How's a club supposed to survive? You can't always ask the guy at the top, especially when we've come to a sustainable model situation. Where in January we had a break-even model, which we put into the EFL. We were going, well done, that's brilliant, fantastic, break even. In the end, don't break even because fans don't come through the door. So yeah, it's been a massive. It's a really difficult time for everybody. It's the mental strain on keeping everything going. It's keeping a show going. You imagine doing say you go to a theatre show and only one person turns up at every show for a year. I mean, that must be so demoralising, but that's how we feel. We're here to entertain the fans one way or another, whether it's good entertainment or bad entertainment. That's what we're here to do, and we can't do that. And there's no one here. I mean, I hate going to the matches. Because there's no atmosphere, and I miss the bit of jip I get. And I'm always looking round. Someone will have a moan at me, and we'll take it. Yeah, all right, it's the same old ones. I miss the guys that have a go at me. I miss the guys that say well done. I miss the guy. That's what it is. That's football. I miss that. and this isn't what you come in as an owner to do. So we're having to cope with a lot. And like I say, all I can do is thank my staff. They've been outstanding. They'll get me through, and I'll get them through. But I'm here, to do my best. And I'm not a chairman who's had 25 years experience. This is my first league club. I'm doing the best I can. And listen, we're not relegated yet, so let's see what we can do for the remainder of this season and get those points on the board, and then we can regroup with what I think is a real good base for next season.
Just on obviously fans being in the stadium, do you think that if there were fans in, that maybe the players would crumble under even more pressure? Because obviously, it's not been great this season, and the fans, it can be quite a kind of volatile place when things aren't going our way, as we saw the League One season when we were relegated.
It's I could ask you that. I think that's a question that answers itself. I think actually this might help some of the youngsters. This might help some of the players who are probably not mentally as strong and don't want to take all the abuse that they get running down the line or whatever. So maybe in that sense, if we get through it all, these players, I mean, they'll be shocked, won't they, when they actually see a few fans and they start shouting at them and having a go at them. But I think it's helped in one way. Certainly their development, but the games become more like friendlies. You get, I don't know how many entertaining games we've had, and that's why I think you get these 1-0ers, because you've got no one driving you forward. You got no one digging at you, which might actually drive you forward. There isn't anything. There's no atmosphere. So you get a goal up, and I think that's what clubs do once they get a goal up. And I don't know what the stats are, but I would have thought it's very difficult to come back.
Well, I think we'll come on to players shortly. Let's just go back to the COVID situation. While you mentioned the money there, obviously you've said there's very little turnover, no cash flow coming into the club. You said in an interview previously that you were worried about the future of the club post February. Is that still something that's relevant to you now, that statement? And can you update us on any money that's basically going to be coming in from higher up?
We've got a meeting this week with the FL, so hopefully there'll be a little bit more news in that. I mean, hopefully. The fact that we haven't got any other money is really disappointing. To be asked to play a whole season with no fans, and we go cap in hand to the Premiership and we've got no other money, and it's. I think it's been disastrous the way we've approached this. We should have probably started the first season going, right, you know what, we're not going to have any fans in. It's going to cost us 200 million, 300 million as a body. We need to go and make sure we've got that funding in place. We'll make sure before the start of the season so that no club has to go on the brink of not being able to pay their bills, because that's what we're being asked to do. Every club is being asked to go onto the brink of not being able to pay their bills before anything's given to them. And that, I think, is it's just not right. And, I've said it in the past, I think a lot more work should have been done at the higher echelons of the EFL to make sure that we were never in this position. But we are where we are. The government has said they'll not let any club go under. The FL have said the FA have said they'll not let any club go under. The Premier League have. I've spoken to Premier League. I've spoken to the FL. I've spoken to the government. That's what they keep telling us. We're here entertaining people, and through this time, and I think without football on the screens, it'd probably be even worse. I don't know how many Walking Dead series you can watch, before it drives you mad. I mean, live football is keeping the country going, and we're not at the top level. We're at the bottom level. You got the National League getting 91 grand a month to maintain their clubs. Anywhere near that's what we're getting. 3 times, 4 times what we're getting at the minute, and we've had nothing apart from 1% of 30 million to help us through a whole season where we're losing 1.9 million, and we're not the only club in that position. But we're working hard. I think we'll be fine. I think we'll get through this season. It's as long as we can start next season with funding in place. We should never have started the season without enough funding in place to protect every club. And I think a lot of League Two clubs and maybe even League One clubs probably wouldn't have started the season if they knew that they wouldn't have any money until December, January. I honestly don't think that they'd have started the season. So coming into next season, if we're still affected by COVID coming into September, then we might have to wait until we've got the funding in place. But no, the club will survive this season one way or another.
You mentioned there that COVID's obviously affected every club in the bottom two divisions. Do you believe it's affected us more than any other club, or do you think it's affecting teams at different times? We've obviously seen we had quite a few players out at the start of the season, but then there's other clubs at the moment that are kind of suffering that as well. And can you use COVID as an excuse really for such a poor season when I suppose it started last year, hadn't it? And it was a poor season last year, and it's just a continuation of that this year.
Has COVID affected us? Yeah, absolutely. You can't operate without income. You have to have income. You have to have. This is a business. It's a business, entertainment business. Money coming in. You can't spend it on players. You can't spend it on anything else. Yes, it has affected us. Has it affected us any more than others? Probably not. I don't know. Not really. Everybody is fighting for their lives. Every team is fighting for their lives, fighting for every penny they can get. We're more apart now as an EFL institution than we've ever been, because it's about survival, individual survival. So I'm just concentrating on Scunthorpe. I don't know about other clubs. You can see that they lose players. We've lost players. We were hit pretty hard when one player, drove in with another player who's perfectly fit, ready to start, and we miss him for 2 weeks. And that's happened on several occasions. My priority is that none of our players are seriously ill or pass this on to anybody in their family, and we can have a safe environment. Every other club is doing the same, but it does affect you. Of course, it affects you. Absolutely does affect you. The initial training, our pre-season, we've not really had a pre-season. The first 10 games are probably our pre-season. So, no, I don't think we're any different to anybody else. I just think it's a very, very difficult time. I think it's whoever deals and copes with the situation will be the teams that survive. I think the ones who can't cope with this and struggle with it will probably fail because of that. But that's not necessarily that you're at the bottom of the table. It's just that you might be struggling to get the finances set up for next year.
Do you think we did cope with it?
We're still coping with it. It's ongoing. It's just ongoing. We're doing our best. It's not going to change to the end of the season. So we're doing flow tests now twice a week. So people are coming in testing twice a week. Fortunately, they're being paid by the EFL. It won't be the PFA, but the EFL. So at least that's happening. But why has it taken, 20 odd games for the EFL to actually put some money into the testing? I just don't understand it. We need more support, and we need the league needs protecting. I think it's very, very difficult to count this as a season. We didn't finish the last one. We didn't have a pre-season. We started another one. We'll get through it. We'll work hard. We'll get through it, and try to support the club as much as we can.
Grimsby were the first club to be fined for COVID breaches following an investigation earlier in this season. And there was also going to be an investigation into Scunthorpe, given our outbreak earlier in this season. Has that been concluded?
Yeah, it has. It has. We're actually not allowed to talk to anybody about it. So that's up to Philip and Grimsby if they decide to talk about it. But that's supposed to be internal only. We had a minor infraction of 7 days, and I think we've dealt with it very well, and we continue to deal with it very well.
So last time we spoke to you on this podcast, we'll come on to the summer recruitments now. We've alluded to it already. You mentioned that you learned from your mistakes in the past, and that you're excited by the business that we'd done. Maybe just clarify from us, what do you feel you did learn from last time? What mistakes do you think you corrected?
I think because we're on a different platform now, because we're moving in a different way, that gives you energy. It's another challenge. So this is not a challenge of trying to to get up to the champ. This is a challenge of trying to survive now in football and be a league club. It's important to be a league club for us, and also to try and build on it and follow in the footsteps of many a club that have done this sort of trading model. So it's, all I want to do is create some entertainment for the fans, and that's all I've ever wanted to do. We've bought some very, very good players in the past, but times are gone now. You can't buy £4,000 a week players. You just can't do it. You've got to be sensible and build from the bottom. So, I've certainly learned the hard way. But hindsight's a really good thing. I think we are where we are, and I might change a few things that have happened over the last 2 years just to make it. I don't know if it made it easy. You never know, do you? You just never know. You might have gone a different way, and it's exactly the same. I'm sitting here doing exactly the same thing, and I've had one manager in place. So, I've learned a lot. I think we still talk a lot about players. There's a lot of players out there, and we make sure that we go and get the right players. Neil's added a different dimension to that. He knows what I need to go and get. More experience for him. But he just asks us what we need to do, and we go and get it. So, and we'll still continue to do that. I've got a lot of good relationships with other football clubs and other chief scouts and other recruitment guys, and we talk about football and players all the time.
The eagle-eyed amongst us noticed that players that came in the summer came from a very small number of agents. I suppose fans are probably wondering, well, I'm certainly wondering how those deals kind of take place. Are agents approaching the club to say, we've got 2 or 3 players you might want to have a look at, or was there any scouting done on those sort of 5 or 6 players that came into the club?
Yeah, those were still on our books. They were still on our books. When Tony was here and we had all the scouts, we spent a huge amount of money on scouting, probably too much, to be honest. And you were looking for different types of players. If you go out and say get the best player and we can afford them, that's what we went and got. Now we're looking for value for money, which is a very, very different sort of process. But a lot of those were still on our books. Spence, I looked at 2 or 3 years ago, and I think he wasn't ready at the time. So Spence then came to the fore. Yes, he was with I think he was with Omni at the time, but we'd already looked at him, and he was on our radar. And I think he's proved himself already. I think there are we try and use probably 6 to 8 agents primarily because we trust them. I think that's really important. But to say when over the winter and over the summer last year, I probably was receiving 20 to 30 texts and phone calls a day from different agents with different players. So you've got to go through all that and see what they've got. And then if they're viable and you think they'll do a job, you go and do a little bit more work on them, and then hopefully you can bring them in and convince them to come to Scunthorpe. Remember, that isn't always the easiest thing to do. I'm pretty pleased with what we got. We weren't 100% successful, but they still might come to the fore in the next year or so. So we'll see how it goes now, and we continue to work towards trying to get the best players who've got the best opportunity to make it in football.
The players that came in the summer, did Lee Turnbull have any input in those players, or were those players that had just been kind of, as you say, recommended by agents that then you went to have a look at?
Most of them were already on our books. A lot of those were already on our books, just revisiting the books. I forget when Turney went in the summer, so no, he wouldn't have had an input into those. But we had to streamline our recruitment. Honestly, we were spending a huge amount on it, and we had to stop it. So we had to do a little bit of work on that. Then he's a mate, he's a friend. It's raw when you lose somebody like that, and I trusted him completely. But we have to look at our finances and see what we can afford. And at the time, we'd got enough information. We needed to move forward on a few players, and we did. We worked hard at trying to bring them in, and it was more the circumstances of not having a proper pre-season and really having to learn on the job for the manager. The first 10 games were very difficult. So But after that, I thought he picked it up. Yes, we've had a bit of a bad run in the last sort of 8 games, but before that, I thought we got ourselves back on a roll, and we've had to correct a few things through injuries and COVID. So we've had to battle that, and we've come through it. Now we've got to ensure we get more points in the next 23 games than we did in the first 23, which I think is going to be a lot easier. But like I say, if we get 23 points, we go down. We deserve it. We deserve it. We haven't played well enough, if that's the case. But I do believe that this team, the players that are coming back in, can win 8 or 9 games and get us out of this.
Well, you mentioned earlier on about how Neil Cox, comes and he says things, the players that he wants and things like that. Obviously, a lot of the players that we brought in, some have worked, some have not. A lot of them were done before Neil Cox was appointed. Given how things have gone and everything like that, do you wish you'd had the manager in place first before that, or do you think these players would have come in anyway?
It's really difficult because obviously COVID had struck. And we were sitting there. Russ had done a great job just steering us through, but we hadn't played anything since March. Difficult to find a manager to fit the circumstances, like I've always tried to do. Experience, getting you out of a problem, being at the other end. It was really difficult, but I thought that if we go down the young approach, we needed somebody that would work with those young players. Probably got fresh ideas. And I wanted a manager that hadn't been a manager before. I wanted a fresh look. I wanted somebody to come in with some fresh eyes, good ideas, enthusiasm, and Neil fitted the bill. And he'd come in. We look at all the players. We didn't really get a good idea of them all until probably game 10, which is when we started picking up a few wins. Some had made the grade and some hadn't. But we had got a big squad, so there were enough there to put a team out and then start to work on moving a few out on loan, see if they could improve on loan or replacing them if they weren't good enough. Fortunately, at the minute, these lads have gone out on loan and we're still assessing quite a few of them. So, there's only a couple out of the 7 or 8 that haven't been in the squad and haven't really made it. So, hopefully maybe they're late bloomers. You never know. See, I'm still enthusiastic, still hoping it might work. You never know. But we're working with Neil now. We identify the same sort of players that we talked about when he came for his interview with me, and that's the way we're going. He probably would want a few more experienced lads in the side. We've done that. I believe we've done that. Bringing Junior and Gem into the side helps us greatly with that. So Jordan being probably in the side a little bit more. I think Jordan has had a lot of football. I'm sure he'll get better with time, but having Jordan in the side has really helped as well. So and listen, even the other lads have had 50 or 100 games. Billy and Issa, they're experienced boys. They can do a job for us. That's not a bad 4. I think that's one of the best midfields. If you put Issa and Gilly wide of Spence and Alfie, that's not a bad 4. That is not a bad 4. And that's with all due respect to Gem and anybody else on the side. That's not a bad 4. So, they just need time together. And we haven't really had that, have we? We haven't really had a side that stayed the same for 3 or 4 games. There's always changes one way or another. And that's injury. That's COVID. That's the times we're in.
A lot of fans have kind of commented and said that this is perhaps one of the worst squads in living memory, certainly since the 70s. How would you react to that?
I don't know. Is it? I don't know. They told me the squad before was the worst one, and the one before that, and the one we had in League 2. I don't know. I mean, listen, everybody can have a view. It's very difficult. The club did very well in the Championship for a couple of years, and they had a really good time of it. Some great players. Once those players gone, it's a lot harder, isn't it? And to be honest, the history of the club, there's been some amazing players in this club, and we have got a very experienced fan base, shall I say. So there's a lot of people here can go back 50, 60 years, and I'm sure they've seen worse sides in 50, 60 years. I don't look at it like that. I look at what we've got and the potential from this squad. I don't think it's that bad. I think League 2 is poor. I think League Two this year is really poor. I think if we'd have started and really clicked and not had too many problems, then we'd be up there. There's no reason to believe some of our performances have been better against the teams higher up the league. But that seems to have been a model, even I think from day one. I think even when we were doing really, really well, we would beat the higher teams, but the low ones we would struggle with because they'd have somebody to target. Scunthorpe weren't the underdog. Scunthorpe were the team to knock off the perch, and when you're up there, that's what gives them a bit of extra incentive. So, no, I don't think it's the worst squad, but that's an opinion. I think it's a developing squad, developing manager, developing team, and I like to think that we get through this season, next season will be a lot better for us.
Last January, we obviously let Novak and Lund go, and I think supporters probably understood the reasons behind it because they were one of amongst the highest earners. We wanted to take this different approach. But you look at the signings in the summer, and you look at the strikers in particular. So obviously, Jarvis, Loft, Mooney, and Duran. If you look at it like that, we obviously let Novak go to save a bit of money and to kind of maybe strengthen elsewhere. But was letting Novak go a bit of a false economy, given we've brought in 4 relatively inexperienced lads, and all right, Loft's done okay in spells, scored a few goals, but in hindsight, would it maybe have been better to bring in maybe one young lad alongside someone a little bit more experienced?
It would have been, but both those players were leaving in the summer anyway. So if you look at that, it was January when they went. In fact, it was only a couple of days before the end of the window, and we shut up shop on March the 7th. So actually, and seeing how they've done well as well, which is quite nice. I always want to see our players do well, regardless of who they are. And I think Lundy's been scoring goals left, right, and centre. But again, he'd had his injury problems. Knows he'd had his injury problems, but he's a great guy. And I don't want at Bradford got his ankle injury there a little bit, but he's backfiring. No, I think it was important. They're the only 2 players we got out since the beginning of the season. And we're supposed to have got nearly 10 out. So, that might have balanced the squad a little bit, and we might have been able to maybe keep Nose if we'd have got other players out, but we didn't get anybody out. We in fact, we were 5 heavier than we were when we started the season, which was not where we should have been. So, we needed to get players out, and that wasn't happening. And in fact, Nose and Lund wouldn't have gone out, I suppose, if Paul was still there. So we'd have been in a right mess, even more financially. It cost us somewhere in the region of £650,000 in wages from March to the end of the season, with nobody playing football. That's what it cost us.
Is that why Hurst left then? Does it come down to those 2 players leaving? No. It's I wish it was as simple as that, but it's not. Listen, I'm not going to go into that. We've done our agreement. He's a manager somewhere else now. It just didn't work. It just did not work one way or another, and we'll leave it as that. I don't really want to go down that route. I'm concentrating on where we are now, and good luck to him. Well, not good luck to him because he's a Grimsby, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, obviously Blazers next, which I'm sure we can come on to later on. Let's talk about Lee Turnbull, and obviously one of the biggest things that's happened at Scunthorpe recently is the appointment of Will Swann. So we'll come on to this. Now, when Turnbull left the club, one of the reasons given was that the role was made redundant. It was only a couple of months later that Will joins the club as head scout. So, firstly, why was that role suddenly reinstated, and then what were you thinking? You must have known how that was going to come across to fans.
Well, I didn't want him to come. I tell you what, if I'm in his position and I'm the son of the chairman and it's Scunthorpe United and all the abuse I'm getting, why would I come to the club? I tell you what, he's got a big set, my lad, to actually have the guts to turn up and do a job that he's been asked to do. I honestly, I didn't even know that he was talking to Neil. Neil decided that he wanted somebody young, very different approach. It was 6 months prior to that Turney had left, but we needed to change all that anyway. We needed to change the way we looked at it. And Neil came to me and said, look, I hate to say this, but I'd love Will to come and, work with me. And like I say, they've worked together before. Let's not, Will. Will find young players You know, he will work very, very hard to get the right players for the club. He's got a lot of contacts. You know, he's had a bit of time in the agency world. He's spent time under Turney here, and now he's out there doing the best role he can possibly do for us. Like I said, I didn't want him to come into the club because I know all the crap he'd get. But you know, he's a man. You know, he's a young man who wants to prove a point, and I can tell you, he's got a plan in his head to get us back to the Championship. You know, and it's like I love to hear that. I love to see that. But he don't get off easy with me. I can tell you that he does not get off easy with me. I will question everything that he brings to the table, and he knows that, and so does Neil. And you know, as long as they can identify the right players that we're all looking at, and they want them, and we can fit them in the squad, we'll do that. But yeah, it's not one thing I wanted to happen. But listen, he'll say, just see what he does. Just see what he does. You know. He'll be based on his record, just as Turney was based on his. And he's a young man starting out in the world, and Turney's been here a long time, 30-odd years, you know, doing the job and managing. He's got so much experience, very difficult to find, but you don't get that for at a cheap price, do you? You know, it's very difficult. I did try and keep him, but it wasn't going to quite work for us. And, you know, you make those decisions, and I made that decision in the summer, and we now move on. But yeah, we'll all do a great job for us. And like I say, I can only support him as much as I can, but I know all the abuse he's going to get because he's a lad. But there you go. Let's see. It was nice that to get Taft in. He did really well there. I think I like Taft a lot. He's a left-sided centre half. Next thing I know is a phone call and Will's on it. So you know, let's hope he gets a few more in and starts to prove himself. You know, I don't think there'll be many of us thinking that if he could do Turney's job, then he'll be a success.
We've had quite a few comments in about this, as you can imagine, and this was quite an interesting one. And it was a question. Basically, obviously, Will is quite still a young lad. You know, he's, as you say, he's kind of making his way and kind of just starting out really in the role. Are there any other kind of businesses you own where there's someone that inexperienced in quite a senior role and a role that has quite a lot of responsibilities? Because obviously, listening back to Neil Cox when he came in, he said he was obviously looking at recruitment for the first team, the 23s, you know, the youth team. It did sound like it was, you know, quite a big role for him. You know, I don't really know how. Yeah, you know how. You know. Yeah, listen. You've got to start somewhere. You've got to take. Listen, like I said, I didn't want him in the business. I didn't want him here because I knew the pressure would be under him. Neil's chosen him. I respect that. Neil is an ex-Premier player. He's a professional footballer. He's a qualified coach. Has decided that William is good enough to do the job for him. I have to stand by that. You would ask me if Neil came to me and said, I want this player, I think he's good enough, I need to sign him. You'd expect me to trust Neil on that, but now I need to trust Neil on this, regardless of who he is. And that's what I've done. I know he's quite capable of doing this job. In fact, I know he's going to do it very well. He's got an immense amount of knowledge of young players throughout the Northwest and Northeast. He really has. You know, we've got to trust him to build it up. And listen, if he can sit in this job for the next 3-4 years, you know, we could have a diamond on our hands, or he may move to a bigger club. You know, as for youngsters, I've got young Ryan in there who's the analyst now. He's only young. He took over from another analyst. He's quite young. You know, it is quite a young side. You know, I've got to take Boone out of that because he's just turned 61. But you know, we need that mix. And I think it's a great mix, and I think Neil's very in fact, Neil's only had 23 games as a manager, you know, so he's in the same boat, isn't he? Really, you've got to work with them and give them the best opportunity you can if they're doing the right things, and I do think they're doing the right things. Is this kind of just confirming what was already in place? Because obviously we used Will when Will was at the agency. We used that agency quite a lot to bring players in. So is it just kind of making that official? Obviously he's been brought in the role, but you know, it's not something that's new to Will. He's been bringing players into the club or helping bring in players into the club for the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years whilst you've been here.
When he was with us, he was helping. When he was with the agency, we didn't really talk too much about it. He would obviously, put some of the players through in the agency. I think Lundy was one, so you can't knock that. There was a few others very successful players who were on their roster, but I also brought in others, talked to other agencies. He weren't the only one. It's one of those things. But while he was at the agency, he worked for them. He wasn't really working for us. He would just put a player. Listen, I've turned down a lot of players. We've turned down a lot of players from all agents, including his. But he learnt a lot there, a lot of experience, and hopefully he can utilise it now going forward. And we use certain ones that we get on with because we trust them. We trust them. But in the end, it's down to the player. It's down to the player. If the players want to play at his best ability, they'll be good. If they don't, or they mentally can't cope with it, then I don't know who you blame. You can keep blaming the agents for passing them on, the scouts for saying they're good, the manager for saying he was good. Where do you stop? You stop at me, don't you? That's what it is. It ends up stopping at me. If it doesn't work, it's my fault. And if it works, it's not my fault. It's I'll never win in this position, but we'll employ the right people, the right time to do the best job. And like I say, it's difficult in recruitment. I think that's a longevity thing, and I'm pleased he's here and working, and I'm sure Neil's enjoying that experience as well.
A lot of players are set to leave in the summer. Amongst them, some of our best players whose contracts is set to expire. What would you say to the fans that are a little bit worried about the team you'll put together? And would that then kind of give us a blank canvas to work with in the summer, assuming that these players, their contracts do lapse? Or are there obviously plans to try and tie them down for another season?
How many would you keep?
3 or 4, I think, personally.
You see what I mean? It's difficult, isn't it? There's some really good players in there, but it is difficult to make that decision, and you can't actually make the decision because we're sort of in a position in the league now where things would change one way or another. Yes, certain players would go, certain players would stay, certain players would come, and if we're a league club, which I undoubtedly think we are, then we have to make those decisions. There are quite a few out of contract and so, but also on a lot more money than is allowed under the salary cap. So we have to, the salary cap average is about £1,100 a week, for players in League Two. That's what the salary cap equates to. And you're only allowed next season 20 players over the age of 23. So you've got to bring your youth through to fill out your squad. And those under 21s have to, and under 23s have to be good players. You'll be spending more on those players than you will on your senior players. Well, I say senior, over 23s. But the market is very quiet. There aren't a lot of players out there. It is, and the ones out there are just not moving anywhere. I think they all think it's going to change in the summer, but if it doesn't, there's going to be a lot of people out of work. A lot of players who will come back for less money or sign contracts in the meantime. As soon as the window closes, you can have a chat to the lads who haven't been approached and say, right, okay, do you fancy this for the next couple of years? We've got a good bunch of lads. I do think there's a team here. There is a team here. And I think, maybe a couple more additions and even a couple more in the summer to get us on the right foot would move us forward, which is great. We've got a few options on a few of the players as well. So, that might surprise a few of you.
Which players are those?
Well, I won't be surprised if I told you now.
Should we let's move on to Neil Cox then, because obviously we've mentioned him there, and you say he's quite an experienced manager playing only 23 games. It's been a really difficult start to management. It's a difficult season. He's not had any luck with the injuries and everything like that. Obviously his remit would be to keep the club in League Two. How do you think him and Mark Lillis and how do you think they're doing as a management team?
They're working very, very hard. The energy levels that they all put in are superb. I think the support as well from our medical team. I must mention our medical team, Michael and Ben and Scott. They're having to do a huge amount of COVID work. I think Michael's been, to suddenly become a pandemic specialist, COVID specialist is like not easy. And these guys have to face it every day with the possibility of them catching it, you know. And I think we've missed them out a little bit. I think there should be some support for those guys, even if it's only maybe having their vaccination so they can work, you know, without that fear of catching anything and taking it back to their families. So a big thanks to the medical team. They work really, really hard at it. But yeah, Neil's fitted in. It's not easy to get everything you want done with the situation we're in. Like I say, when you can't go up to the local school and play on the artificial because the school's shut, or the COVID issues, you can't mix. Been up to Doncaster a couple of times on the artificial there, and then back to do set pieces at the club. This is what we're having to do. So he's having to cope with a lot. I like what I see on the training field. It's not always easy with the younger lads for them to transfer it onto the pitch, and that has been a problem. I think not really had time to spend on all the other bits outside of knowing your position on the pitch. So, you know, with young lads, you're teaching them how to be a centre half, a wing, or a midfielder, aren't you? That's what they're doing. And really, what they want to be doing is spend a little bit of time set pieces, what we need to do here to score goals, down to the defence. So, I think he's doing a great job under the circumstances, and you know, I'm not going to give him the. Oh yeah, I will. You know, the guy's got to stay in this job. He's got to do the job. He's got to get through it, keep us up, and he'll be stronger for it. Absolutely, 100%. I have full faith that he will get us up and keep us up. Sorry.
You said when we spoke in the summer, you said that having spoken to Cox in a sort of interview setting, if you like, or informal interview, that you both wanted to play attacking football and you wanted to see wingers taking on players and exciting football. Do you think that's happened enough this season?
No way. We've had some terrible games. I mean, the Barrow was awful, absolutely horrendous. We have to play on awful pitches. You can't play football on it. And the thing is, when you can't play football on a pitch, you need that experience in your team, don't you, really? And because we've got young lads who want to play football, they make mistakes. And I think that's what's happened. Unfortunately, actually, some of our senior guys have even made a couple of mistakes recently, which has cost a goal or two. But, you know, we will make mistakes, and the youngsters will make mistakes. And, you know, I think there's you've got to have a lot of patience with them. Got to work with them. You know, they've got to believe in what you're putting out there, and they've got to go and do it on the pitch. And sometimes young players, they just lose themselves in the moment and take one extra touch, make one bad pass. The problem is, we seem to have got hit with that costing us matches. So we've got to alleviate that. We've been here before. I think I've been talking about this before under a couple of other managers where we've done exactly the same thing, and we have to get back. We were pretty poor under Stuart, and like I say, I think out of the last 13 games with Paul, we got 12 points out of 39. Well, that's relegation form. So we weren't improving there. We weren't getting any better, and we had a really good squad. So I think whoever's in there, you've just got to support the best you can and try and get them to play a way that they're comfortable with. Now, we wanted to play two up top. The Cox wanted to play two up top. That's our first call. But with everything that's happened, it's been difficult to do that. But I think, you know, as we go forward and we get some of the players back, you'll see a more attacking stance to the games. I mean, I don't know whether I can cope with a 0-1 or a 4-3. To be honest, I suppose as long as we won, it wouldn't be too bad. But yeah, it would be nice to be more entertaining. But you know what? I haven't seen very many entertaining games in League Two. They are, you know, look at the surfaces. When you look at Barrow, look at Bradford, Grimsby, you look at Mansfield. I mean, you look at, you know, ours is holding up pretty well at the minute, but you can't play football at Newport. You can't play football on some of those pitches, and it's all about a bounce, a willingness to just chase after a lost cause. You know, it's got a lot to do with luck and determination than it has about ability as well. So hopefully we can get the best out of Neil and the team in the coming months and turn a corner.
One player that's kind of, you're talking about the pitches, and yes, you know, we've seen some awful pitches this season. I don't know, some teams do rely on set pieces at this level, and we're quite poor, I would say, at the moment. defending set pieces and also at the other end as well. Obviously, hopefully the new signings will help and Taff will help with that. But in terms of kind of delivery into the box and things like that, one player we've kind of mentioned already, Mason O'Malley, he's been left out of the side for a couple of games. He was providing that delivery from set piece and things like that. And I think fans believe now he's been left out, we're not kind of creating as much from those opportunities. What would you say to that? And is there a reason behind him being left out? I know you've said there's no interest in him or anything like that, but surely, young players, you maybe take out the firing line if they've had bad games or made mistakes. I think he's probably the only one of the young lads that have come in this season that hasn't really put up wrong. I appreciate he might be a little bit tired, but surely if he's playing well, he should be in there. And he's creating chances, so you're taking that threat out of the team as well.
Yeah, he's done okay. I mean, listen, the manager makes that decision on what he wants to do with the team. And certainly, the reason hasn't been for the last couple of games is basically because we want to look after him. But you've said it there, what he gives us in a match. The last thing you need is to have him playing 23, 24 games, and then we're losing for 4 or 5 games. So, and I think we're trying to nurture him through. He's only a young man. Yeah, he's got good delivery. I will hesitate to say that actually, if you look at some of the goals that we have conceded on that side, he has been a little bit naive, but that's a young player. He's not the only one. Our pass in the midfield, our midfielders have let the ball go, and even our experienced lads at the back have made messes. So, we're trying to look after him. I think we think a lot of him, but we do that with all the players. He's not the only one. We're trying to look after all of them. He's not going anywhere. There's nobody in for him. He's learning. He's signed a new contract for us. He's a big part of our future, and he will only get better. By looking after him, we hopefully will get a better player and a mentally strong player. I saw him in training today, and he was as hungry as ever, which is nice. Is what you want. And certainly, if Junior's out this weekend, I expect him in the squad. You would have thought so, because Junior probably struggled a little bit to Barrow, and probably was a little bit unfortunate, to be honest, in the game. I mean, another poor ref, just unbelievable. There's nothing underhand or there's nothing strange about it. We're just looking after a young player. We do it with anyone.
Fans, of late are maybe a little bit disappointed with the kind of cautious and defensive style of football that we're currently playing. It's been kind of on and off all season, I suppose. But it's not just sort of endemic to Scunthorpe. Why do you think nearly all managers in recent years have kind of reverted to this style of football? We seem to see it in a lot more prevalence than we have done before.
I think there's a fear. I think there's sometimes a fear of losing a football match, and that's probably the whole business, isn't it? The whole football league is based on winning matches. The Premiership is based on winning. If you don't win matches and you lose matches and you lose more matches, your job's under threat. You never get a chance to develop. And I think sometimes it's very difficult to have a brave person at the helm. It is. And I think with Neil, you can see that we went through a patch where he was and excited, and then we started conceding too many goals quickly. We'd conceded 2 quick goals, and that was the end of the game. And I think it was really important for him, so he could get a handle on it, is to try and avoid those 2-goal, 3-goal defeats at that time. And maybe we got in a rut where, the more you play like that, the more it carries on. And we've seen that with many managers. We saw that with every manager, I think, that's been in position, is that they struggle to be as free in that position. But he has got all the freedom he wants. So this is a great opportunity through difficult times to just go out and play football. But like I say, these matches, they don't have the atmosphere, they don't have the push, whether that's positive or negative, there is nothing to feed off of. Apart, all you hear is the manager shouting, and that's it. An assistant manager shouting. I mean, the players, in a game would probably go and play their own game and probably create more and do more things, but they tend to be listening more because that's the only voice they can hear. So, I think with Neil, you've got to. The idea was to bring him in to get him through this this season, and hopefully he'd grow from that, and I think he will. I think he'll get better. I think there's a really good manager in there, and we have to persevere with him.
You say we have to persevere with him there. So obviously we've got 23 games left. Is Neil safe regardless of what happens in those 23 games?
I don't know what else we can do. I don't think there's any sense in changing manager. I've done it enough times, to understand that. To understand you can't just give them 8 months. You can't give them 6 months. You just can't do it. You have to give them a little bit longer, as long as they maintain the ethos of when they came to the club. So as long as they said, "This is what I want to do. I'm happy to do this," and you know what you've got to do, and that's to develop young players and bring those players through. As long as that stays, then we're brilliant. It's fantastic, and I think he will. He'll be a very, very good manager, and like I say, I think we need to keep him in place. I think he'll improve. Use this experience. You don't get this experience. Some managers never get this experience of being down the bottom. They're always mid-table or upper table. This is an opportunity to say, I don't want to be down here again. And the mistakes I've made now, I don't want to make in the future. Maybe the starting lineups, maybe the substitutions. As long as he learns from all of those, then you'll get a better manager. If he does, and I get that from Neil. I get the fact that he wants to learn. I get the fact that he's going to make mistakes. I get the fact that he's as gutted as me on a Sunday when we talk to each other about another lost game, and we talk about the game. And I want to wake up a bit happier on a Monday, And it would be really nice to go in knowing that we've had a win. And it's not that we haven't had a win. It's the fact that there are no fans out there talking about the win. There's no fans who've watched the match. It's without the fans, it's a nothing sport, to be honest.
So another thing that's seemingly quite common is the injuries. I mean, every year at this sort of time, we're sort of having quite a big injury list, and obviously that means that a large amount of the budget is taken up by injuries to key players. Obviously, this year we've had Kev and obviously Harrison as well, who, as Matt said earlier, with saleable players, they are two potentially. Maybe something could have been done with there. Why is it the case that this is seemingly every year we get injuries around about this sort of time?
I don't know. I'm looked at the medical. I know for the last 2. I know certainly for this last year it's been difficult, but that's been the pre-season. I also think we didn't have a very good pre-season before. I don't think we've had a proper pre-season since Graham left. With all due respect, I think the trip to Austria was a very sensible thing to do. Obviously not now, but I mean, it's a week away, and it's about hard work. It's not about entertainment. It's not having a good time. It's not having a night off. It's about working hard, getting back, having a game. And then knowing that when you come in to play games and play friendlies, you're fit and you're going to be strong. It's been very difficult because COVID hasn't allowed to do that. When we first started training, which probably was July, we were training in bubbles of 4. There was no contact for a week or 2. Then you could only go in a group of 8. All of a sudden, before I think actually before we played the first team match, we probably only had 2 sessions together as a whole team. So this year's been difficult, and the pre-season has caused problems. Plus, these are things that happen. Unfortunately for Kev, we got his op done on his knee, and he just come back too quick. And that's no detriment to the lad. He really wants to play football, and he come back too quick. And I think Harrison came back too quick as well. But it's very difficult when the lads doing their performance. You can see it on the screen. You can see they're up to 100% or 95% running. All their stats say they're ready to play. You go and give them a friendly, they do really well, and then or a 23s game, and then they come into the side and they jump and land like he did. Harrison just landed, I think, if I remember, and he did it. And Kev again, just twisted his other knee. So it's. I don't know if there's. I'd have to look. I haven't looked at the medical evidence to say that it's a specific time, but I suppose what you could say in the winter, when it's cold and you haven't warmed up correctly, or perhaps the cold's got into your joints, that maybe that is a reason for the hamstring injuries. But we're not the only one. We're not the only club this year. There's a lot of clubs who've had hamstring injuries. It's the most prevalent injury throughout the Football League at the minute.
As you said, Peter, that maybe we have kind of rushed a couple of players back too early before they were fully fit. So who kind of makes that decision when a player says, I'm fit to play, boss? Who makes that final decision? Is it the player? Is it the medical staff? Or is it the manager?
Well, I think it's the manager in the end. The manager's told by the medical staff, and the player says he's ready to play. He feels fine. What do you do? I think we probably played Junior one game too much, which it was. Junior came in and played 3 or 4 games, I think, and then the 5th game or the 4th game, he broke down because he hadn't played a lot of football. And he's identifying that, because if you're doing okay and you win in a few games, it's very difficult to change the game just for the sake of it. So I think the players have to take a bit of responsibility. If they're not 100%, they have to tell us, and sometimes that doesn't happen. The medical team can see them; they can stretch out. They can be 95%. You'd never know. But if there's something wrong, even when they're playing, if they suddenly feel a twinge and they carry on, or they twist their ankle and they carry on, they've got to look after themselves, and that's something that a lot of young players don't do. They just want to play, and they want to play through it, and that's usually not advisable. But it's a combination. No one goes out there. We never risk anybody. The players who go out there are players that have passed all the tests to play football. So it's just some people are susceptible to injuries and some aren't. I mean, we've had those seen over the years. There's a lot of players that have hardly played any games for us because they've had an injury. Lund, I think Matty Lund was out nearly a whole season, wasn't it? The season came down. And yet he's out there playing again. So you just got to have a bit of luck, I think, as well. But the players need to know their bodies and need to know when they need a rest or when they need a break. So we do our best, but we're never going to be perfect on it.
One player that's kind of been injured, I would say more than most since he joined the club, is Jordan Hallam. Obviously, clearly he's got talent, and clearly when he's been able to show what he can do on the pitch, he's done quite well. Is there an update on him? Is he likely to come back anytime soon?
Training today. I saw him today. He looked very mobile. That's a frustrating side of it when you see these players and they look great, and then something just happens. It's just little things that happen, and Geordie's not had a run in the team. He's a good player, but occasionally things happen, and I don't know how to explain it really. I mean, we had the same with Williams, who came from Middlesbrough, really talented player who just every time he would come back he'd get injured. Now that could be a way of life, it could be the way they live. I don't know. It could be that the fact that they don't eat well, because all these things are so interesting. When you combine it all, they have to eat well, they have to live well to be a footballer. You can't play Xbox till 2 o'clock in the morning. You can't get up in the morning and eat 8 Pop-Tarts. These sort of things are the things you can't do. But you find players do that. I'm not saying Jordan does, but I mean, but players, if they don't look after their bodies and they look after themselves and they're not honest with themselves. I remember a lot of these players at times have had to be at home for a week and train on their own in isolation. So if you lose 2 weeks or a week, that's 3 weeks in training time. So it's difficult for them to adapt as well. But it's all part of it. We try and help them as much as we can, but we've only just got the chef back in because he's only now been able to do the food and that for us. But for the first couple of months, they just had to come in, train, jump in the cars and couldn't shower and went home. So, I mean, that, and as for games as well, we can't stay over for some of the games, so we have to drive early in the morning and change various kickoff times so that we can get to clubs and just be there for an hour or so and then come back. So it's there's a lot to cope with, and some players can and some players can't. So but with Geordie, he looked great today. Having him in the side, he does give us something different. So he gives us a bit of pace and he runs it behind. And let's hope he gets his opportunity.
Just sort of aware of how long we've kept you. We'll start to wrap up. We've just got one or two more, bit more general questions. Obviously, you've mentioned the fact that fans aren't in the stadium, anything like that. So obviously, we're watching on iFollow. Now, obviously, a lot's been made of away games and the fact that you need to sell over 500 before the club make any money. But I think a side of it that's not often discussed is more the home side of it, the home games. So on top of the season tickets that we've already sold, roughly how many extra are we getting per home games this season?
Not many. because obviously all the season ticket holders get their passes for free. So we don't get too many on top of that. We've had a few for the away games, but not many times we get more than 500 when we go away. Obviously, if you've got a bigger game at home, then like someone like Bradford may do 1,000, so you get 500 of those. It's not ideal. It's not a huge income coming in, especially for a small club like ourselves. We don't really go above 3,500. It's very difficult. The only thing I'll say is that when we do get back playing in front of fans, that the smaller clubs may have a bigger opportunity to get fans in than the bigger clubs. I think I don't know if many big crowds of 20 and 30 and 40,000 will be allowed into grounds. I think that might be a thing of the past. I think it's going to be a slow start on that side. So hopefully we can get a couple of thousand in. We know if we can get 3.5 in, that's pretty much all of us. So we're working on various projects to try and get as many in as we can next season. But this season is gone. There's no fans are going to come in. And then we've got to work towards how do we get income in the summer. If we don't start next season with fans in the grounds, it's going to be a disaster again for us. And I can only see that happening at the minute. I can't. I can't see people turning up in their thousands when there are still a lot of people to be vaccinated. So that could still be September, October before we get fans back in.
Has the club looked at any other ideas to kind of raise additional funds as kind of part of the virtual match day experience, if you like, things like a halftime 50-50 or a raffle or a competition or something like that can kind of be, maybe drawn at halftime or something like that?
Yeah, I suppose if you're at home, it's a little bit easier. Away, it's a little bit more difficult. Yeah, we are looking at those things, but we also know how difficult it is for people to spend money at the minute, although I'm hoping they're all saving it up for the future, which would be great. But there isn't a lot of money going around, and we understand that the hardships a lot of our fans are going through. So, a lot of people have still been buying merchandise, which is fantastic. I think the shirt's been great this year. It's such a shame, isn't it? We get it right one year. We don't hardly get anybody moaning about shirts, and no one can go out and bloody watch them. So, it is difficult. But we're working on everything. We're trying keeping costs down on stuff. Since I came to the club, we hardly raised anything. Season tickets, prices. The only time we ever raised it was when we brought an outside caterer in, and then we soon knocked that on the head. And got the prices back down again. We've tried to make it affordable for every fan, but we understand the hardships they're going through. And at the minute, we think that the government and the EFL, the FA should be handling this and making sure that the clubs like ourselves are supported through it, regardless of who the owner is or what people think the owner's worth. It's about cash flow. And if you haven't planned the cash flow, you haven't got any money, and that's it, full stop. You can't just plug it from out of the air. So it's the same with us. We've got to manage those pennies, but we do appreciate everything that everybody's doing, and if we can think of any other ideas or anybody can do that, then great. We've got a teams meeting next week on Monday with several of the fans groups. It's the first one where we're going to have a chat and talk through and hopefully start to establish more of a sort of an underboard where fans can have a little bit more say and talk to us about what they want from the club.
Why the change on that then? Because obviously the AGMs were scrapped, and there's been, I don't know if it's a reluctance, but there's not been many meetings with fans groups. I know obviously the Iron Trust would have liked to, and that's not happened over the years. Obviously reasons for that. But why the sudden change, and why do you feel the need that you need to get sort of the fans groups involved? I think it's a great idea, but why has that come about now?
I think for a start, we because of the route that we're going down to be a sustainable model. Every fan, everybody's been calling. They want this to be a sustainable model for the football club. So we've done that, and we want the fans to be aware of what we've done and how we operate as a football club. I do believe we've operated very well over the years. The money that's gone in to support the extra wages is from us. There's been no threat on the club. There's no debt in there. So we also want the information from these fans groups. We want to know what the fans want from us. how they like to see things done. And I would like these fans group to see what's happening. They can understand we've come a long way from day one. You know, our systems, our everything that we do now is modernised and up to date. You know, we're a proper club, run correctly. We're just short of cash, like everybody else at the minute. But we want the fans to see it, and let's get them involved. You know, tell us what you want, and we'll see if we can make it happen. It's very hard to suggest any other way. I mean, yeah, previously it wasn't not having the board meetings and not having the shareholders things, because I own 91.5%, so we don't have to do that, and it's a cost. You know, there's a cost putting everything on there, and we ran it in a certain way. Still own 91.5%, but what I'm saying is, come in and let's listen to you. Let's see what you've got on the table, and you know, and if we can make the club a better club, then we'll do that. It's but actually running a club and making the big decisions, it's very difficult to do that in a democracy. You can't. You've seen how many different views have you seen on the game? How many different views on who should be manager, who should be playing? You know, if you put that out to a democratic vote every week, it'll be a nightmare, and it doesn't work. So that part of it you can't. But the actual running of the club, and where the fans want to make an impact in that, then you know, this is the time to do it as we change tack. So you know, we'll listen to the guys and see what they can come forward, and we'll see if we can make this a regular occurrence. We've always had forums. Again, it's difficult because of the period that we're in at the minute, and they will come back. Obviously, these podcasts are a great help because the fans can listen to them, and you know, we can cover many topics, and I've been as honest as I can. So I don't think anybody can say that I haven't been forward and talked about everything, whether we've been doing well or whether we've been doing bad, and I'll continue to do that.
We already mentioned the flats earlier on, and just briefly, I think the land in front of Sands venue has been sold quite recently, and a consortium is applying for planning of a 120-bed hotel, you know, gyms, shop, restaurants, that sort of thing. Does that affect us? Because it sounds like a very similar project to the one that initially you had in mind.
No, it helps us. Helps us completely. I'm not putting a hotel on there, so they're putting a hotel, 120-room hotel. We need gyms. I think gyms are going to. Ours was slightly different. Ours are NHS based anyway, and we still want to do some work on that side of things. The flats are just, you know, for people. They are there's something that there are not a lot of these flats are in the area, but the general feeling is that a lot of people would like to start on the ladder, and you know, they're not going to be expensive being in Scunthorpe. We're right on the motorway network. It's a great place to live. We're right next to the shops. You know, it is a good place to live, and hopefully that will work. We're working on a few other ideas we've got. Maybe even a road onto the dual carriageway, which will be hopefully finally they start to work on, finish that roundabout. It's only took them about 5 years, but hopefully if they finish that, we might have a road off onto there, which again makes us a more valuable site. And what we want to do is make sure that we can make the most of it. We've got plans for a training ground facility not too far away. We still want to do all this. It's just very difficult to do that under these circumstances where there's no money flying around and investment's very difficult to find. But our plans are still to make the club a better club and make it sound and safe for the future generations of the area.
Do we need that road, you know, to do the flats? Is it kind of an emergency exit or anything like that?
No. All it will be is just a road in and road off. When the stadium was built, it was put right at the back of the retail park, wasn't it? Really, so you could only get to it off that one road. The fact that we could have another exit onto the road on a match day and during the week means that there's a flow of traffic through the whole site, which means that you can. You know, if you've got a place on there or you've got other facilities, then they can be used, and there's an easy on-off. You know, it makes the traffic and highways plan a lot easier, and that's what we're hoping to. We're just talking to somebody about it at the minute, but you know, it costs money to get those plans done up, and we want to make sure we're in the right position to do that. But yeah, that will definitely help us. If I don't know if you see, there is a road that is, call it a Ransom Street. The road that's not used at the side of Frankie and Benny's, just up behind the car, there's a road there that comes onto our land. you know, that hasn't been used because it's a ransom strip on the other guys. But if we put our road onto the motorway, which should be downgraded to a dual carriageway, then that will give everybody a flow through the site. We can make it a lot easier. You know, we don't want people spending 45 minutes to get out. We need to do something, and that would help. So yeah, we're looking at many things. The flats are only one part of it. We're looking at some other bits and pieces, some educational stuff, maybe some retail. So we want to make the best out of the land, and we want to use that money to sort of build better facilities for training. You know, we still want to keep our youth and academy, our under 23s, and our first team. That's a lot of looking after. Love them to be in one place. So that's the plan going forward.
Just a couple of things.
Yeah.
I think we clarified it on one of the podcasts, but just obviously, get your opinion on it. I think there was an article last month regarding Paul Hurst that he actually left the club and resigned. We put that out there that wasn't the case, but do you just want to confirm that from the horse's mouth? Yeah,
I think it was just a mistake by their journalist. I think he actually turned around and said that, I don't know why he said it, to be honest, but no, that Paul was sacked. That was it, full stop. You know, we've had to cover that expense up until he moved to Grimsby, so that's not really helped us as well. I'm not going to say any more than that. So that was the case. I think I said it at the time. I'm sure Paul was not really bothered about it, as I'm not really. It's just journalism. Again, a few journalists who take the mick a bit, to be honest.
And finally, obviously, the Grimsby kickoff has been moved forward, and that's definitely pissed off one fan. Just your opinions on that, really. You know, obviously there was a bit of confusion regarding who was it the police, was it the club that moved that forward? Could you just clarify that for us?
I think our guy sent out an email which actually wasn't quite 100% on it. Every year when there's a Grimsby and a Scunthorpe match, the kickoff times changed, as you know, and we took that as being read as an agreement by Humberside Police that it would be a 1 o'clock kickoff. Grimsby actually changed theirs from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. So it was just a miscommunication. To be honest, you know what? I spent about 2 minutes on it, and I think that the person you mentioned spent a whole day and maybe even a whole week writing about it. So he obviously didn't have a lot else to say, did he? Really? I mean, what a mess. No, it's a kickoff time. I think even the other press, I think, you know, Humberside on it. What does it matter, really? There's more important things to talk about than a kickoff time. If you want to say that, you know, I'm not doing my job because I've said the wrong thing, or we sent an email out that wasn't quite right. Listen, I'm not going to sack anybody over it, for God's sake. It's just a mistake, and we move on. It was just a time that was in place. Every time we play Grimsby, that's the time. It is 1 o'clock, and we thought that was in place, and that is a police request to be at 1 o'clock every year. So we just left it in, and our media gone, all right, we'll send it out and say, yeah, that is a police request, and we just left it in. That's all. Anyway, I try not to take too much. I probably got it wrong there, but you never know. I don't care. To be honest, it doesn't really matter. I know I'm going to get up in the morning and go in and be somewhere at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Doesn't really matter. You know, it's a time. Waste of time. I've just wasted my time. I wasted 1 minute on this.
Just one last one then to end with. And obviously, as you mentioned, Grimsby at the weekend, you know, very big game for us. Obviously, you've covered an awful lot on this tonight already, but is there just like one message you want to end with for the fans just going forward?
Well, I know many messages. Just try and not get too nervous about it. Try and support the manager as best you can. I know you can't go and do that at the match, and I know I've asked this before, and I've had a great response from guys. And you know, we even sang a couple of songs as well. I think it's quite amazing for us at times. But you know, we're coming into a great match at the weekend. One, you know what? I wish the fans were around. Can you imagine the atmosphere? Oh my God, it'll be great. You know, 6,500 at our ground. It would have been fantastic. You know, and we're not going to get a 4-3 or a 3-3, are we? They're games which are so tight. usually one goal separates both sides, and it's whoever wants it on the day. We didn't turn up last time. We didn't turn up. We never. But I tell you what, we'll turn up this week. We will turn up this week, and we have got the lads who want it, and they want to win it. And if they don't turn up and they don't want the game, then we'll beat them. I sound like Kevin Keegan then, didn't I? But it's a great game to have. Want to keep this game as long as we can. Let's go and beat them. We own one now, so looking forward to it greatly. Even though I'm going to be sitting at home watching it and not at the ground.
Appreciate all your time. Thank you.
No, wonderful. Take care, guys.
And cheers everybody for listening. We'll see you on the next one.